Hi, it's Grandma again. I have another chapter from Little House for you. This one is called Winter Days and Winter Nights. The first snow came and the bitter cold. Every morning Pa took his gun and his traps and was gone all day in the big woods, setting the small traps for muskrats and mink along the creeks, and the middle-sized traps for foxes and wolves in the woods. He set out the big bear traps, hoping to get a fat bear before they all went to their dens for the winter. One morning he came back and took the horses and the sled and hurried away again. He had shot a bear. Laura and Mary jumped up and down and clapped their hands, and they were so glad. Mary shouted, "I want the drumstick! I want the drumstick!" Mary did not know how big a bear's drumstick is. A bear's drumstick is like as big as your dad. It's big. When Pa came back, he had both a bear and a pig in the wagon. He had been going through the woods with a big bear trap in his hands and the gun on his shoulder when he walked around a big pine tree covered with snow, and there was the bear behind the tree. Now here you can see. There's Pa shooting the bear because the bear has grabbed somebody's pig. The bear had just killed the pig and was picking it up to eat it. Pa said the bear was standing up on his hind legs, holding the pig in its paws just like they were hands. Pa shot the bear, and since there was no way of knowing where the pig came from, nor whose pig it was. "So I brought home the bacon," said Pa. They had plenty of fresh meat to last for a long time. The days and nights were so cold that the pork in a box and the bear meat hanging in the little shed outside the back door were solidly frozen and did not thaw. When Ma wanted fresh meat for dinner, Pa took the axe and cut off a chunk of frozen bear meat or pork. But the sausage balls, or the salt pork, or the smoked hams and the venison, Ma could get those for herself from the shed or the attic. The snow kept coming until it drifted and banked against the house. In the mornings, the window panes were covered with frost in beautiful pictures of trees and flowers and fairies. Ma said that Jack Frost had come in the night and made the pretty pictures while everyone was asleep. Laura thought that Jack Frost was a little man all snowy white, with a glittering white pointed cap and soft white knee boots made of deerskin. His coat was white and his mittens were white. He did not carry a gun on his back, but in his hands he had shining, sharp tools with which he carved his pictures. Laura and Mary were allowed to take Ma's thimble and make pretty patterns of circles in the frost on the glass, but they never spoiled the pictures that Jack Frost made in the night. When they put their mouths close to the pane and blew their breath on it, the white frost melted and ran in drops down the glass. Then they could see the drifts of snow outdoors and the great trees standing bare and black, making thin blue shadows on the white snow. Laura and Mary helped Ma with the work. Every morning there were dishes to wipe. Mary wiped more of them than Laura because she was bigger, but Laura always wiped carefully her own little cup and plate. By the time the dishes were all wiped and set away, the trundle bed was aired. Then, standing one on each side, Mary and Laura straightened the covers and tucked them in well at the foot and sides, and plumped the pillows and put them back in place. Then Ma pushed the trundle bed back into its place under the big bed. Here's a picture of their trundle bed. See, it's very short so that it can fit underneath a tall bed. After this was done, Ma began the work that belonged to that day. Each day had its own proper work. Ma used to say, "Wash on Monday, iron on Tuesday, mend on Wednesday, churn on Thursday, clean on Friday, bake on Saturday, rest on Sunday." Laura liked the churning and baking days best of all the week. Now, in the winter, the cream was not yellow like it was in the summer, and the butter churned from it was white and not so pretty. So Ma liked everything on her table to be pretty, so in the wintertime she colored the butter. After she put the cream in the tall crockery churn and set it near the stove to warm, she washed and scraped a long orange carrot. Then she grated it on the bottom of the old leaky tin pan that Pa had punched full of nail holes for her. She rubbed the carrot across the roughness until she rubbed it all through the holes, and when she lifted up the pan there was some soft, juicy mound of grated carrot. She put this in a little pan of milk on the stove, and while the milk was hot, she poured milk and carrot into a cloth bag. Then she squeezed the bright yellow milk into the churn where it colored all the cream. Now the butter would be yellow. Laura and Mary were allowed to eat the carrot after the milk had been squeezed out. Mary thought that she should have the larger share because she was older, and Laura thought that she should have it because she was littler. But Ma said they must divide it evenly. It was very good. After the cream was ready, Ma scalded the long wooden churn dash, and she put it in the churn, and she dropped the wooden churn cover over it. The churn cover had a little round hole in the middle, and Ma moved the dash up and down and up and down through the hole. Okay, here. There's the butter churn. Whoop. All right, there's the churn, and there's the cover, and there's the dash. The dash is kind of like a broomstick, only it's got a thing on the end that smooshes the cream, so to make butter. She churned for a long time. Mary could sometimes churn while Ma rested, but the dash was too heavy for Laura. At first, the splashes of cream showed thick and smooth around the little hole. After a long time, they began to look grainy. Then Ma churned more slowly, and on the dash there began to appear tiny grains of yellow butter. When Ma took the churn cover off, there was the butter in a golden lump drowning in the buttermilk. When Ma took out the lump with the golden paddle and into a wooden bowl, she washed it with many times in cold water, turning it over and over and working it with the paddle until the water ran clear. After this, she salted it. Now came the best part of the churning. Ma molded the butter. On the loose bottom of the wooden butter mold, there was a picture of a strawberry with 2 strawberry leaves. With the paddle, Ma packed butter tightly into the mold until it was full. It's kind of like a little bowl, and it has carvings in the bottom. Then she turned it upside down on the plate and pushed on the handle of the loose bottom, and then the little firm pat of golden butter came out. It had strawberry and leaves molded on the top. Laura and Mary watched breathless, one on each side of Ma, while the golden little butter pats, each with its strawberry on top, dropped out onto the plate as Ma put all the butter through the mold. Then she gave them each a drink of good, healthy buttermilk. On Saturdays, when Ma made the bread, they each had a little piece of dough to make into a little loaf. They might have a bit of cookie dough, too, to make cookies, and once Laura even made a pie in her patty pan. After the day's work was done, Ma sometimes cut paper dolls for them. She cut the dolls out of stiff white paper and drew their faces on with pencil. Then with bits of little colored paper, she cut dresses and hats and ribbons and laces so that Laura and Mary could dress all of their dolls beautifully. But the best time of all was at night when Pa came home. He would come in from his tramping through the snowy woods with little tiny icicles hanging on the ends of his mustaches. He would hang his gun on the wall over the door and throw off his fur cap and coat and mittens and call, "Well, where's my little half-pint of sweet cider half-drunk up?" That was Laura because she was so small. Laura and Mary would run to climb on his knees and sit there while he warmed himself by the fire, and then he would put on his coat and cap and mittens again and go back out to do the chores and bring in plenty of wood for the fire. Sometimes, when Pa had walked his trap lines and quickly because the traps were empty, or if he'd gotten some game sooner than usual, he would come home early, and then he would have time to play with Laura and Mary. One game they loved was called Mad Dog. Pa would run his fingers through his thick brown hair, standing it up all on end, and then he dropped on all fours, growling. And he chased Laura and Mary all around the room, trying to get them cornered where they couldn't get away. Here's a picture of them playing Mad Dog. There's Pa, all fruffed up, and Laura and Mary. Oh no! They were quick at dodging and running, but once he caught them against the wood box behind the stove. They couldn't get past Pa, and there was no other way out. Pa growled so terribly, and his hair was so wild, and his eyes so fierce, it all seemed so real. Mary was so frightened that she could not move. But as Pa came nearer, Laura screamed, and with a wild leap and a scramble, she went over the wood box, dragging Mary with her. All at once there was no Mad Dog at all. There was only Pa, standing there with his blue eyes shining, looking at Laura. "Well," he said to her, "you're only a little half pint of cider half drunk up, but by jinks, you're as strong as a little French horse." "You shouldn't frighten the children so, Charles," Ma said. "Look how big their eyes are." Pa looked, and then he took down his fiddle, and he began to play and sing. Yankee Doodle went to town, wore his striped trousies. He swore he couldn't see the town, there were so many housies. Laura and Mary forgot all about the Mad Dog. And then he saw some great big guns, big log of maple, and every time they turned 'em round, that took 2 yoke of cattle. And every time they fired 'em off, it took a horn of powder. It made a noise like Father's gun, only a nation louder. Pa was keeping his time with his foot, and Laura clapped her hands to the music when he sang. This is different than the song we usually sing. And I'll sing Yankee Doodle Dee Doo, I'll sing Yankee Doodle. I'll sing Yankee Doodle Dee Doo, I'll sing Yankee Doodle. All alone in the big woods with the snow and the cold, the little log house was warm and snug and cozy, and Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura and baby Carrie were comfortable and happy there, especially at night. Then the fire was shining on the hearth, and the cold and the dark and the wild beasts were all shut out, and Jack the brindle bulldog and Black Susan the cat lay blinking at the flames in the fireplace. Ma sat in her rocking chair, sewing by the light of the lamp on the table. The lamp was bright and shiny. There was salt in the bottom of the glass bowl with the kerosene to keep the kerosene from exploding, and there were little bits of red flannel amongst the salt to make it pretty. It was pretty. Laura loved to look at the lamp with its glass chimney so clean and sparkling, and the yellow flame burning so steadily, and the bowl of clear kerosene colored red by the bits of flannel. She loved to look at the fire in the fireplace, flickering and changing all the time, burning yellow and red and sometimes green above the logs, and hovering blue over the golden and ruby coals. And then Pa told stories. When Laura and Mary begged him for a story, he would take them on his knees and tickle their faces with his long whiskers until they laughed out loud. His eyes were blue and merry. One night, Pa looked at Black Susan stretching herself in front of the fire and running her claws out and in, and he said, "Did you know that a panther is a cat? It's a great, big, wild cat." "No," said Laura. "Well, it is," said Pa. "Just imagine Black Susan, only bigger than Jack, and fiercer than Jack when he growls. She would be just like a panther." He settled Laura and Mary more comfortably on his knees, and then he said, "I'll tell you about Grandpa and the panther." "Your grandpa?" Laura asked. "No, Laura, your grandpa, my father." "Oh," Laura said. She wriggled closer against Pa's arm. She knew her grandpa. He lived far away in the big woods in a big log house. And Pa began the story of Grandpa and the Panther. Your grandpa went to town one day and was late starting home. It was dark when he came riding his horse through the big woods, so dark that he could hardly see the road. And when he heard a panther scream, he was frightened, for he had not brought his gun. "How does a panther scream?" Laura asked. "Like a woman," said Pa, "like this." And then he screamed so loudly that Laura and Mary shivered with terror. Ma jumped in her chair and said, "Mercy, Charles!" But Laura and Mary loved to be scared like that. The horse with Grandpa on him ran fast, for it was frightened too, but it could not get away from the panther. That panther followed them through the dark woods. It was a hungry panther, and it came as fast as that horse could run. It screamed now on one side of the road and now on the other side, and always close behind. Grandpa leaned forward in the saddle and urged the horse to run faster. The horse was running as fast as it possibly could run, and still the panther screamed close behind. When Grandpa caught a glimpse of it as it leaped from treetop to treetop almost overhead, it was huge. Black Panther leaping through the air like Black Susan on a mouse. It was many, many times bigger than Black Susan. It was so big that if it leapt on Grandpa, it could kill him with its enormous slashing claws and long, sharp teeth. So Grandpa on his horse was running away from it, just like a mouse runs from a cat. The panther did not scream anymore. Grandpa did not see it anymore, but he knew it was coming, leaping after him in the dark woods behind him. The horse ran with all its might. At last the horse ran up to Grandpa's house. Grandpa saw the panther springing. Grandpa jumped off the horse against the door, and he burst through the door and slammed it behind him. The panther landed on the horse's back, just where Grandpa had been. The horse screamed terribly and ran. He ran away into the big woods with the panther riding his back and ripping his back with its claws. But Grandpa grabbed his gun from the wall and got to the window just in time to shoot the panther dead. Grandpa said that he would never again go to the big woods with his gun. And here's Grandpa on his horse, running away from the panther. When Pa told this story, Laura and Mary shivered and snuggled closer to him. They were safe and snug on his knees with his strong arms around them. They liked to be there, too, before the warm fire with Black Susan purring on the hearth and the good dog Jack stretched out beside her. When they heard a wolf howl, Jack's head lifted and the hairs rode stiff against his back. But Laura and Mary listened to that lonely sound in the dark and the cold of the big woods, and they were not afraid. They were cozy and comfortable and safe in their little house made of logs, with the snow drifting around it and the wind crying because it could not get in by the fire. All right, that's the end of chapter 2, and the next chapter is about the long rifle, and we'll get to that in a day or two. And I'll see if I can find some more stories and poetry for you in the meantime. Bye now.